Thank you very much for giving me the privilege and honor to speak to you tonight. Today's topic is going to be called The Way of the Wizard. And this is the next leap we need to take as a species to recognize that all of us are wizards. That there is deep inside us a wizard, a shaman, a healer, a genius, a Merlin that can create a life of magic for us, that can take us into the world of the miraculous and the magical, and that life can once again become enchanted. Of course, being a seer, the wizard has no gender. It is only the clumsiness of English that turns Merlin into a he, as does our language with God and prophet and seer, and many words that are far beyond male and female. Wizardess is a clumsy word, so please know that wizard applies to women as well as men. If anything, the return of the magical has really been greeted more quickly by women in our society than anyone else. And for that, I'm grateful to womanhood. What is the wizard? How do we go about finding the wizard inside us? The route to the wizard is through the evolution of our own consciousness. Jonas Salk, the eminent scientist, the late Jonas Salk, coined the word metabiological evolution. Metabiological evolution, when he said that so-called Darwinian evolution, which was based on the survival of the fittest, is possibly over for us as a human species. That we are in a new phase of evolution. That the next stage of evolution is really the evolution of consciousness. And ultimately, it is the evolution of consciousness of consciousness. We have been, for the last several hundred years, in a sense, victims of a response that we developed thousands of years ago, which was at that time very crucial to our survival. That response that's genetically programmed within every cell of our body. And scientists recognize that response and give it a label. It's called the flight-fright response. We lived in a hostile environment as hunter-gatherers. We were surrounded by animals who found us quite delicious. And we learned to protect ourselves either by running or by fighting. And that was useful at that time. Now that same flight-fright response is triggered by imaginary fears, by traffic jams, by the stock market, by things people say to us. And that response has very limited function. What it is doing now to us is creating an epidemic of cardiovascular disease, compromised immune systems, the epidemic of cancer, degenerative disorders. But even more importantly, it has given rise to a legacy of war and hatred and predation and conquest and subjugation and ecological devastation. We have become the predators on planet Earth. And just like other predators before us, we are risking our own extinction and risking the extinction of Mother Earth and this wonderful universe of which we are a privileged species. So, I think there is an urgent need for the wizard to return. There is an urgent need for the wizard to wake up within us. The wizard seeks what we have always sought deep inside us. What we have sought as humans is freedom. ultimately, that is what we are seeking. And there are levels of freedom, of course. You ask somebody, what is freedom? Perhaps the most superficial level of freedom is, I want to be able to do what I want, when I want. A second level of freedom is the ability to fulfill our desires. And we've already covered that in another program, the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. What is the mechanics through which we fulfill our desires? Material desires, emotional desires, spiritual desires, etc. But there is the third level of freedom. And that third level of freedom is the ability to escape the prison of the known, the prison of our past conditioning, where we are triggered by people and circumstance into predictable outcomes of behavior. We are at the mercy of every passerby in the street. And then there's a fourth level of freedom, which is the ability to make spontaneously correct choices, spontaneous right action, those choices that bring about our evolution and fulfillment, the evolution of those that are affected by that choice. And then we can go beyond that into even other levels of freedom, which we're going to explore in this program today, where we, in fact, enter realms of consciousness that are beyond waking, beyond dreaming, and beyond sleeping. 99.9% of humanity is continuously circulating between waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Are there other worlds to explore in our own consciousness? A great rishi, a great seer from the Vedic tradition of India said a long time ago, he said, infinite worlds come and go in the vast expanse of my consciousness. They're like motes of dust that are dancing in a beam of light that's shining through a hole in my roof. So that also is another level of freedom, to explore that world beyond waking, dreaming, and sleeping. And finally, freedom is to escape the boundaries of space and time, to experience ourselves in our pure essence, which is spirit. The great poet Rumi once said, you are the unconditioned spirit that's trapped in conditions, like the sun in eclipse. The fact that the real you and me cannot be squeezed into the volume of a body or the span of a lifetime. That freedom to escape the boundaries of space and time. Because we are not in space and time. You've heard the expression, you're in this world but not of it. What does that mean? There's a part of us that is participating in space and time, and yet another part that is free as the wind and beyond. Free as the dust in the dust. Free as the wind in the wind. Rumi once said, in love with life, my soul lives the subtlest of passions, lives like a gypsy. Each day a different house, each night under the stars. We're gypsies on planet Earth, here for a short time, here to give us and each other joy. But freedom in that sense can only be experienced when we begin to recognize that the real me is in this world, but not of it. And there are people in the past who have walked this way of the wizard. There have been saints and philosophers and poets and prophets and seers and sages who have walked this way in the past. And today, a lot of wizards are waking up in society. There are some very ordinary people who are not famous, who are wizards. They may be standing in the grocery store in front of you, or flying in that plane that just went by, or walking on the street before your house. It's happening at an astonishingly rapid way. Collective consciousness is merging into what can only be called, or emerging into what it can only be called, a critical mass, when everybody is going to become a wizard. And all these wizards had said the same thing. They have said that deep inside you, there is an inner intelligence. And this intelligence is the ultimate and supreme genius. It mirrors the wisdom of the universe. And when you find this intelligence, then life will become magical and miraculous for you. And this way of the wizard, this journey, which is a journey and a destination at the same time, it begins with a simple question that humanity has asked for thousands of years. The question is, who am I? Who am I? And when we first ask this question of ourselves, I think the first thing that we encounter is confusion and chaos. And that is all right. That is all right. The German philosopher Nietzsche once said, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Chaos and confusion and uncertainty are the ingredients, the recipe for the emergence of clarity and intuition and order and knowledge and wisdom. Václav Havel, the founding president of the new Czechoslovakia, once said, "Keep the company and seek the company of those who are looking for the truth and run away from those who have found it." So we are on a quest together. We are on a journey together. We're not going to find the truth tonight, but we are going to find it as we go within and start exploring the realms of our own consciousness. And it's not an easy thing to do. The Upanishads of India have called it, this path of the wizard, the razor's edge, because it can be treacherous. As we first encounter our inner self, we begin to see confusion. The great Sufi poet Rumi was once asked, "Who are you?" And he said, "If you try and label me and confine me with your labels, you will starve yourself. You will starve yourself of yourself. Confine me in a box of cold words, that box will be your coffin, because I do not know who I am. I'm in astounding, lucid confusion." And he said something really beautiful. He said, "I'm your own voice echoing off the walls of God. The walls of God that are infinite, unbounded. Your own voice." It's another way of saying that the universe is a response of the observer. So as we go within ourselves, we find that we are a conglomeration of ambiguities, an agglutination of different archetypal energies that are stoking the fire of life in the basement of our souls. Look in the clumsiness of English that turns Merlin into a he, as does our language with God and prophet and seer, and many words that are far beyond male and female. Wizardess is a clumsy word, so please know that wizard applies to women as well as men. If anything, the return of the magical has really been greeted more quickly by women in our society than anyone else. And for that, I'm grateful to womanhood. What is the wizard? Magic for us that can take us into the world of the miraculous and the magical, and that life can once again become enchanted. Of course, being a seer, the wizard has no gender. It is only that recognize that all of us are wizards, that there is deep inside us a wizard, a shaman, a healer, a genius, a Merlin that can create a life of magic. Thank you very much for giving me the privilege and honor to speak to you tonight. Today's topic is going to be called The Way of the Wizard. And this is the next leap we need to take as a species to